So what we have here, to follow up on Kennedy's words, is we have our Constitution being made subject to foreign influence, decisions of foreign courts. I'm not sure how many Americans understand the consequences if the United States of America founded as a Judeo-Christian country. Our values, our morals, our traditions, our beliefs, our mores, all of those things that gave us our commonality. And historians tell us, people like Christopher Dawson and Arnold Toynbee and a great many others, every culture that we know of, that they know of, the historians, has religion as its foundation. Now, obviously, most of it would not be Judeo-Christian, but every known civilization that they have found, that they've read about and studied, has religion at its base, and that religion, whatever it be, gives the body of people that form that civilization, it gives them what they call the core body of beliefs. Values, mores, ideas of justice, right, wrong, what is acceptable, what's not, etc. America her base was Judeo-Christian, and it gave us that common core. Every society has to have a core body of beliefs. It unites the people. It gives them common understandings. It gives them common movements. It gives them a common destiny. And it helps to maintain order, harmony, peace within the civilization. You don't have various groups, for example, going in one direction, another group going in another. Now, even in a common core culture, certainly you have people that may not agree with this or agree with that. But at least we had a common understanding of certain things. People would acknowledge, yes, that's right. Marriage between a man and a woman. That is breaking down in America. I think the last time I read 55%, something like that, now think that it's okay that they should be able to get married. It's also declining in Virginia. It's over 52% now, I think, that approve of them having equality in marriage. What this tells you is the Christian consensus in America has collapsed. When I first read that by Dr. Francis Schaeffer some years ago, I did not agree with him. I don't mean to say that in a way to sound haughty or more intellectual than Dr. Schaeffer. I will never, ever, could never be as intellectual as Dr. Schaeffer. The man was absolutely brilliant. But I was a much younger Christian then, and I just didn't think maybe that was quite right. But I've come to believe in the following succeeding years that he was right. The Christian consensus in America has collapsed. And this is why the writers tell us that our moral debates today are intractable. In other words, you can't resolve it because people have different moral premises. They're coming from different beliefs, different values, different morals. And all you're seeing today increasingly is yelling at one another, screaming at one another, anger, hostility, and you can't get the moral needs settled like you should. When there was a common core of beliefs, we pretty much moved in a similar direction. Our laws reflected those common beliefs and so forth, and morality, and no longer does. And so we see there's been a breakdown in our culture. In his powerful book, When Nations Die, Jim Nelson Black said, civilizations arise from religion, and when the traditional beliefs in a nation are eroded, the nation dies. The historian Christopher Dawson noted that Christianity is the soul of Western civilization, and when the soul is gone, the body putrefies. Folks, you're looking at a dying nation. That's what you're looking at. We are living in a nation. This is not the America I grew up in. It's not the nation you grew up in. America is dying. We're dying internally. We're dying spiritually. We're dying morally because we have permitted our foundational beliefs and values, our Judeo-Christian foundation, to be eroded and dismantled by those who are in power, those who are supposed to be, as Mr. Hamilton said, our trustees. There's one final thing I'd like to mention as a contributing factor to this crisis, and that is the 14th Amendment. It is an amendment that was put together resolution-wise in 1866, or 5 rather, by the 39th Congress. They said it was ratified, or declared it to be ratified, Secretary of State Seward in 1868. It was never constitutionally ratified. I don't have time this evening to go into all of the reasons. I got into it in my book, A Constitutional Crisis, the Role of the Federal Judiciary in the Transformation and Secularization of America, which is available if you're interested on the internet, Amazon and Barnes & Nobles and others. Got the plug in, but I get into it in depth so you understand how this crisis came about, what we need to do. But this amendment was never ratified. It has no place in the Constitution at all. It was never ratified. Orville Browning, who was a senator from Illinois and also a member at the same time of President Andrew Jackson's cabinet, he summed up well the opposition to this amendment when he said, "Be assured that if the new provision be engrafted in the Constitution, it will in time change the entire structure and texture of our government, and sweep away all the guarantees of safety devised and provided for," he said, "the states by our patriotic sires of the Revolution." The words of Senator Browning were very prophetic and now are being witnessed, or is before you for all to see. The Charleston Carrier, Charleston, South Carolina, the Charleston Carrier, looking at this proposed amendment sent to the South Carolina, said this: "It confers new and enormous powers upon Congress and is fraught with evil." The Florida Union of Jacksonville said the amendment would destroy the old Constitution with its systems of checks and balances, and would tear away the safeguards of the states and give the federal government power to control local affairs. By way of this unconstitutional amendment, the Supreme Court of the United States has massively enlarged its powers, giving it to go well beyond Article 3 of the United States Constitution. Its powers are limited. They are enumerated under Article 3 of the Constitution. The court now ranges far and as wide as it wills to delve into matters for which it was never given authority. Ruel Berger, I've read Mr. Berger. He's a powerful constitutional professor, retired out of Harvard. He wrote that the court has, by way of the 14th Amendment, assumed power to rewrite the Constitution, and in so doing, and I quote him, have taken over from the people control of their own destiny, comma, an enormous exercise of power. By the Supreme Court's illegal assimilation of powers not granted, let me quickly give some what has come out of it. They have transformed and restructured the governmental order established by the Constitution. In other words, they're dismantling federalism, and they have applied the Bill of Rights to the states. The Bill of Rights, their effect, their purpose, their function has been nullified. Through the 14th Amendment, they have applied the Bill of Rights to the states. That is unconstitutional. And this is how they enter into the states to control, to get their fingers, their voice, their will into virtually everything within the states. It has developed rules and practices to govern the criminal processes in the states, which in their restrictions or restrictiveness have hindered law and order and thwarted justice all too often. It has limited and taken to itself the authority to tell us how, when, and under what circumstances we can employ manifest Christianity. Mr. Madison said the federal government has absolutely no power to intermeddle in the religious affairs of the states. Mr. Jefferson said the same. Where did they get it from? 14th Amendment. They've taken it from the states, for which, again, they have absolutely no authority. The Constitution, or the court rather, has given free speech protection to pornography, to obscenity, to profanity, which has degraded and coarsened our culture. Listen to what Mr. Jefferson said. taking from the states the moral rule of their citizens and subordinating it to the general authority, that is the federal government, would break up the foundations of the Union. Mr. Madison said that all moral laws were left with, or the moral laws or the governance of their people was left with the states. Left with the states, not the federal government. The federal government had limited and defined powers. It was to take care of those. The states would take care of their people. They would control the criminal justice, the laws in their states. They would control the moral laws. If they wanted prayer in the public schools, it would be there. If they didn't want it, it would not be there. Determined, of course, by the people themselves. By way of Roe versus Wade decision, the court started America down the path of the loss of the sanctity of human life. We now have physician-assisted suicide, infanticide, and of course you're aware of the proposed death penalty in the Affordable Health Care Act. The court has given constitutional sanction to homosexual sodomy, which I've already mentioned in Lawrence versus Texas, and Romer versus Evans, and now in the most recent case, United States versus Windsor. What this means will be a loss of traditional marriage. Traditional marriage will no longer be the cornerstone of society as it has been for thousands of years. And also that tradition which God Almighty Himself established. And this court continues to be a major instrument in the centralization of power in Washington. Thomas Jefferson said, "There is no danger I apprehend so much as the consolidation of our government by the noiseless and therefore unalarming instrumentality of the Supreme Court. When all government," he said, "domestic and foreign, in little and in large things, great things, shall be drawn to Washington as the center of power, it will render powerless the checks provided one government upon another." He's speaking of the federal and the states. There's checks on those two. He said it'll destroy those checks and will become as venal and oppressive as the government from which we separated, Britain. In this constitutional crisis, there is a rectification. There is a remedy. And if there is a remedy, if there is rectification, it must come from we, the people. We, the people, formed this government. We, the people, ratified this Constitution. Let me say to you, we should certainly elect the very best people we possibly can to go to Washington. I like what someone said. If you ever hear a candidate running for federal office, and he tells you, "When I get to Washington, I'm going to change things," he said, "You remember when he gets to Washington, Washington will change him." How many times have we seen that? Yes, we should elect, and the framers would hardly agree, that we should elect the very best men and women that we can to go to Washington. Ones that stand for the Constitution and our founding order and those great traditions and principles that have made us so great. James Madison said the fountain of power rests with the people. And we, the people, have permitted, tragically, whether by negligence, whether by acquiescence, we have permitted misplaced trust to accompany those who go to Washington. And as such, power has shifted from us to our trustees and our representatives, who now act as our masters. Mr. Hamilton said in Federal 78, "The deputy is not greater than the principal, nor is the servant above his master." I close with the words of Arnold Toynbee as expressed by Jim Nelson Black. And this, I think, holds the key to our recovery of the Constitution and our founding order. Again, it's going to rest and will rest unalterably, I believe, with the people of the United States. I hope and pray God that there are enough Americans left, and I still believe there are, who are willing to stand up and to do whatever is necessary within the law to recover our Constitution and the governmental order of its establishment, our rights and our liberties.